All right, guys, welcome to the Tuesday, November 30th pre-recorded Zoom. Right, so pretty much following up from what we had mentioned on Friday, right? One, we had gotten a very bearish weekly closure, right? And even though we can't fully assume this low here is unwillingness until the full high is taken, from an overall perspective, we know that internally we have been unwilling to come back down into a previous liquidity point. So this can now be seen as a turbulence point, which is giving us, right, short-term, medium-term, long-term potential. But what it has for sure given us is bullish momentum, bullish order flow, bullish structure. So when I move this down into a daily time frame, right, what we had mentioned last week, right, was the fact that, right, although we could potentially see a reversal in terms of the continuation of high-low retracement continuation potentially, even though it's not a solidified structural range in terms of the weekly, but in terms of a swing major intraday bias, this entire leg is bearish, and it is in terms of higher momentum than what we are in currently. So although that is technically bearish, right, internally we are bullish, right? And as you can see, we had pointed out this POI on Friday, and we wanted to see how we would react here to see if we could be given, you know, a continuation or a full-on reversal. So we're at a pretty interesting point because we have reacted from the POI that we mentioned, right? And as of now, we have also reacted from the inefficiency in place. So when I'm trying to find a bias internally, right, my structural range was bullish. I know in order to reach the discount, right, the overall just POI that we had mentioned, I know we have to be bearish internally. So I know from high to low, retracement, continuation, we did not break, right, the POI, right? So from there, we created a minor intraday continuation here. So based on this reaction, the POI has been valid, and that, you know, is in play currently. So I know that internally, now based on this, right, it's only a matter of time on whether I'm going to create the discount continuation, or if we start seeing consolidation, maybe willingness, followed by a liquidity grab and a continuation to the downside, right? So as of now, I don't have a true bias. Excuse me. Because although we have reacted from the POI that we have mentioned, we are still reacting from in a previous inefficiency fill. So it's just a matter of seeing, right, what type of transition we're going to get, because this is obviously corrective movement to the downside, right, which means that internally that is bearish, right, based on break of structure there. So I know, right, that we are bearish coming down, so I'm looking for the transition to see which direction we're wanting to take, because especially if we close somewhat like this today, right, I would be more so inclined to want to be more bullish just because of the reaction and the continuation of internal structure. But I need, right, obviously this to not fail, right? So we were correct on Friday about the POI continuation, right? And now that the POI continuation has happened, I only need to see a type of bullish transition so I can then take a position to the upside. Or likewise, any type of structural disruption, liquidity grab, order flow disruption to the downside to then give me a reversal sign. So it's all reactive based. Moves us on to EU, right? Very, very sloppy one. Unfortunately, my position from here did break even, right, after partial one. I did take a bit of volume off, but unfortunately it did end up breaking even, right? And although we had mentioned, right, the potential continuation based on a structural range, we were giving unwillingness and a continuation to the upside. So let me actually delete. Okay. Right, so from a weekly perspective, I know, right, that just like DXY, we had a very bullish closure, whereas in DXY, we had a very bearish closure, right? So that could be a sign of wanting us to continue higher. But when I'm looking at structure now, when I'm looking for a longer term position, right, I am now seeing a potential bullish transition because from structure perspective, high, low, retracement, unwillingness, break of structure. The break of structure gives a sign of bullishness, but that sign of bullishness was emitted here, right? That sign of bullishness is now non-existent at the moment. Why? Because internally, one high, two high, those two highs led to, right, a liquidity grab, internally being, right, a transition because our final leg to the upside, right, was then taken out, right? So I know now, right, low, high, high, low, meaning that once this breaks, that solidifies the range here and here. So that was just a discount, a premium continuation, right? Meaning there was a bearish transition upon taking out previous liquidity, which led us to, right, a massive move to the downside, which took liquidity. So very, very strong momentum, right? Meaning all of this here is inefficiency. So this could literally be just a liquidity grab to the upside if we have the proper transition here in terms in workout perspective, a type of reaccumulation, right? In order flow perspective, a type of disruption that will give us, right, a move to the upside. But without that, you can't really make that judgment because technically, right, internally medium-term bias, right, minor intraday bias is bearish, right, because we took out a previous structure point. So like I said, you need to focus on those transitions to really judge where a realistic bias could be. Looking at GU next. GU was interesting. AU and GU were interesting because I haven't really touched GU in a bit. But right, the bias never really changed here, and you never saw a true sign of bullishness, right? In terms of our major highs, meaning high, 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 never gave, never broke, never even came close to being challenged, right? So when we're looking at this from an overall perspective, all we have been doing is intraday continuations, although it has been very, very choppy. You can see where order flow is currently and where order flow is technically, giving us a potential move. Let me 1 second. Right, might have tapped, might not have tapped. But what I was looking at this morning, right, was the fact that we had a pretty much a consolidation phase where that was then taken into liquidity, that was then mitigated, and that then gave you a downside move, right? In my opinion, a very high risk trade to take, especially if you look internally. There wasn't really the best of setup unless you're looking at your M1s, and by that I mean, right, for one, you're mitigating this, and you're also breaking structure here, meaning from an order flow perspective, the final mitigated candle with a invalidation up here, that is a reasonable scenario. But the only issue, in my opinion, there would have been the fact that we did not reach, right, the POI here. If we would have reached the POI there, then that's now in support, and I'm now, full on bearish. But internally, I didn't see much. Yeah, I didn't see much internally that would have made sense besides potential wick there. But yeah, very interesting to see this continue lower, because if you guys remember the position I have from back up here, right, you're now seeing this entire move play out based on a bearish transition. And by that I mean, right, obviously the final push up was here, which led to taking liquidity, which led to taking structure, meaning you are now in conversion of bearishness. So I believe my entry was up here somewhere. And that is now, you know, essentially continuing, because we now have a structural range, high, low, high, low, high, low, high, low. Continuation BOS here solidifies high, low retracement, right? So high, low, high, low, high, low. So from in terms of the entire range, right, this was never, you know, bullish whatsoever. It was always bearish due to the fact of the bearish transition, right? Which is why the positions, I believe it should be here, I believe. But that's why the positions, right, are still carrying further, because all we're doing is what we're doing internally, right, with structural ranges and waiting for the continuation BOS to give you the solidified structural range. So all we're doing that is now on obviously H4 daily, and seeing this manifest in front of your eyes is a very good thing in terms of learning and watching this happen, right? Because although conditions are never the same, the principles are primarily all the same. Same thing with AU, right? AU position, right, that we had mentioned has hit a target, right, which is back from up here. I'll try to do my best to do a study on this week. We'll be on the lookout for that. Maybe potentially to on GU. I might just do them together, who knows. But with AU, right, we discussed this. I believe I discussed this entry back in the beginning of the month. Could have been the 12th of November, maybe the 9th. But this is now giving you that, you know, that full-on push that we had mentioned, and it is following what we had mentioned before in terms of, right, in terms of the fact that we had the order flow disruption here, which then gave us a continuation to then take out previous liquidity, which means that now if we sustain ourselves below here, we don't give any liquidity grabs, any bullish transitions, we are now aiming for here, right? So it's just a matter of time, because we know that we are bearish, right, in terms of transition, high, low, right? And I don't really like to reference this too much, but really getting the vibes of this. Where is this? This pretty much seeing, oh, I'm not on Zoom, I can't annotate here, sorry. Pretty much markup, right? Transition being distribution, but we would consider that a transition, and then the markdown being, right, markup, transition, markdown, right? And what we're seeing is that cycle pretty much complete in this entire area here, right? And that would pretty much complete, in my opinion, once we reached this X, right? X marks the spot, I guess. But yeah, with that being said, thank you guys for hopping onto this pre-recorded lecture, and I will see you guys on Friday. Please make sure to bring your some studies or something, just so we could, you know, keep talking and make the Zooms relatively longer on Fridays and Tuesdays. Because if you guys don't give me that, then, you know, the Zooms will all be, you know, 15-20 minutes, which is good in some aspects, because I get to the point. But it could also be bad because, you know, a lot of people, you know, want to see those explanations, and maybe even see members go through case studies, so that, you know, you get a different perspective. So yeah, with that being said, I'll see you guys on Friday.